Hey everyone, this is Nenad, and I would like to talk to you today about loops. This is something that I didn't really quite introduce in great detail, and I kind of rushed this in the last lecture, and we need to understand this a little bit better so we can be successful at solving problems at one. All right, here we go. Okay, so let's talk about loops. Here's my Jupyter notebook, and we're going to discuss two types of loops today. That's the while loop and the for loop. With both of the loops, you can accomplish pretty much exactly the same thing, but they work a little bit differently. So first of all, let's talk about why we are using loops. So we would use loops if we would like to perform the same action, for example, multiple times. So if you want to do something 10 times, we're not going to write print 10 times. We can just use a loop and write print once, and then just say, I want you to do this 10 times. In another example is when we use sequences. So we learned during the last lecture that strings are sequences. They are mini strings that are strung together. Another type of sequences are lists. So if we wanted to do something with every element of that sequence, we can use a loop to iterate through that sequence and do something. We can do some kind of a test. We can ask with an if statement, we can ask whether something is true or not. We can change something. And we can do this for every single element or an element of interest, or we can skip certain elements with loops. And they're definitely a very useful tool, and it's going to prove to be an essential tool for in your programming toolkit. So, okay, let's get started here. This is a very simple example. So I have a company name, and the company name is just a variable where I have assigned in this variable it's going to be a string, and the name of the company is going to be Pied Piper. If you guys haven't seen Silicon Valley, it's a great show. You should definitely check it out. Pied Piper is going to be the value of our company name, and we want to do something for every letter in this company name. So let's see how the while loop works first. So let's see the structure. So we see here while, which is the keyword. This while keyword is reserved for Python, so you can't name anything else while. So this is a reserved keyword, and it only serves for while loops. So we see here that we have a while loop, and then here we have something that looks familiar. So this seems to be like a logic test, right? So we're testing here whether the value of position is smaller than the length of the company name variable. So that's interesting. So that means that if this evaluates to true, then everything that is indented is going to execute. Okay, so again, let's go over this. So we have the while statement, we have a truth check, true or false. If it's true, we're going to do everything that's indented, and if it's false, it's just going to continue. So that's interesting. So let's see. So position, we can set this position above the while loop to be 0. We're setting this because we want to start with, remember that strings are indexed and they start from index 0. So we want to start from the first position, and that would be position 0. So okay, we start from 0, and the first check that we're going to do is 0 smaller than the length of the company name? Okay, so what is the length? Well, we can easily check the length. Let's say we can just, let's insert one more cell above here. I'm going to take this and copy it right here. And I'm just going to go ahead and print the length of my string. Great. looks like our length is 10. So that means that this is going to evaluate to the following. So it's going to be 0 is smaller than 10. And the interesting thing about that is that 0, well, we know that 0 is smaller than 10. So if we were to print 0 smaller than 10, that will be true. Excellent. So while this is true, do this. I think that's great. So if we were to not do this line here, and I'm going to explain what I'm doing. So as you can imagine, because this is a loop, it's going to execute this line, and then it's going to come back again, and it's going to check again. Is position smaller than length of the company name? Well, since we didn't change the position, if we don't change it, it's going to be 0 forever. So it's going to keep checking, well, is 0 smaller than the length of the company name? Yes, okay, then we'll print the company name at the position, which is 0. So it's just going to keep printing P forever. And eventually it's going to crash. So in order to avoid that, what we want to do is, since we want to go and check every letter, we are going to, at each step, increase the position by 1. So position is first 0, and 0 is smaller than the length, which is 10, right? Just to not, so I don't confuse you here, I'm just going to replace this with 10, just so it's easier to think about this, easier to look at. And so we're going to print the company name at this particular index. So we're going to access a particular index in the company name variable. So first is going to be 0, so position is going to be 0, so that's going to be P. And then we're going to increase position by 1. So there is another notation for this in computer science. This would work in most programming languages. And basically, what we can do is, so we have assigned here to position the expression position plus 1. So it's 0 plus 1. So position is going to become 1. But we can also express this as plus equals 1. This is just a shorter way of saying the same thing. So when you say plus equals 1 means whatever the value of position was, add 1 and make position now to be equal to the sum of those. So excellent. So now we have a nice shorter way of displaying this. And now once we increase this, now we're at step 2 of the iteration. So now position becomes 1. So now we check here. While position is smaller than 10. So 1 is still smaller than 10. And now we're going to print the company name at index 1, which is I. Then we're going to increase position again by 1. And now position is going to be 2. So at index 2, we have E. 2 is still smaller than 10. We're going to print out the company name at 2. So that's going to be E. And so on, until finally we get, we're going to print out R, and position is eventually going to become 10. And then when we check, is 10 smaller than 10? Okay, is 10 smaller than 10? 10 is not smaller than 10, so that's going to give us false. The moment that gives us false here, we're going to break out of the while loop. So we're done with the loop, and we're just going to continue executing any line that's below the loop as normal. So important to note is that you can do a lot of things here. So you can definitely, this is not the only number of lines you can do. So you can this while loop can be quite big actually. You can do many things. So let's see what happens when we execute it. All right. Great. So as expected, we printed the entire name one by one. We accessed every letter one by one. And we executed 10 print statements. And the moment we finished with the while loop, we printed this, okay, we're outside of the loop now. Okay, so let's do something more interesting. So let's say that I was interested in checking the case of each of these characters in this name. And let's say I wanted to collect all the letters that were lowercase. Okay, so I'm going to make my empty string here, lowercase collector. I'll call it like that. Kind of a long name for that, but anyway. And I can do this. If you want to make an empty string, so that will be just a string with nothing in it. So this is my empty string. Okay. And so instead of printing right now, I can do something like this. So I can check if the company name at this position is lower. Okay. So if that character is lowercase character, I'm going to add that character. I'm going to concatenate it to my lowercase collector. Now, remember, you see, this is automatically just going to indent for me. So because we're executing an if statement inside the while loop, whatever, if this happens to be true, then everything that's indented in the if statement will be executed. So make sure that these indentations is something that you pay very close attention to. And always use tab, don't use space. So tab, you can tab back with shift tab, press shift and then press tab, you're going to go back, and you can press tab to go forward. Okay. So what did I say? So I said that I will, I'm going to, and by the way, so if you, I just typed lower and then I pressed tab and I just finished my filling up the, I didn't type everything, so you just finished filling the variable name for me. You can do that kind of stuff. So lowercase collector, we can say, so we learned how to do this, right? So we know that we can concatenate strings with the plus. So we can say plus equals, and we're going to add that letter. So don't forget, no matter what happens here, like if it's true or if it's false, because of the fact that this is at the same indentation, this will execute. So increasing the position has nothing to do with this if statement here, right? And we can also, of course, I said we can have an else statement here, but we don't need to. But we can say else. You can say print something like, oops. No, it was uppercase. Okay, let's try this. All right, let's see what happens. Okay, so we have, no, it was uppercase, no, it was uppercase, no, it was uppercase, and let's see what we got for our lowercase collector. Okay, so we have Pied Piper, and as you can see, if our characters was lowercase, um, then we added that character to our empty string. So for every lowercase character that we detected, which was IEDIPER, we now concatenated that to our empty string, and we just built a new string basically out of that with an if statement and with the while loop. So that's pretty cool. So you may notice here that we got this 3 times. So that's kind of strange, right? So it seems like that it counted our empty space as an uppercase character. So, if we actually if we didn't have it and we just had it like that, I'm pretty sure this is going to print only twice. Yep, there you go. Aha. Now, what happened? Why did I get this error? You see, it says the string index is out of range. And the reason for that is that came now, we changed the length of our company name. So it's no longer 10. So we need to make sure that we change that. But to be safe and not to make that kind of mistake, you shouldn't use this kind of values explicitly. Python will know exactly how big it is. So here we go. So I think this is pretty straightforward. So you can do some kind of truth check. If that is true, you can do something, and if it's false, then you will do something else. Make sure when you use while loops if to update correctly, and you should make sure that as you're updating, you um, you reach that case. So you reach that case where this evaluates to false. Otherwise, this may go forever. So make sure that that does not happen. Okay, so I think this is pretty straightforward, and this is and the other loop is not more complicated than this. It just works in a little different way. Let's talk about the for loop. So the for loop, um, and both of them are. I have to say that both the while loop and the for loop are interchangeable. I tend to use the for loop way more, but for the most part, you can accomplish the same things with both. So let's start again. So we have the same company. Let's try a different company. So let's try Aviato, the incubator. So we have, again, a company name, which is a variable that holds our string. Make sure when you name your variables that they're lowercase, and that they're as descriptive as possible. So if your variables are descriptive, then it's very easy to get away with writing as little comments as possible, because you can read the code and you can say, aha, okay, so this is a variable that's holding some kind of a name, and what kind of name is it holding? Well, it's company name. Well, if you did something like a, that would be kind of bad, because you not really know what a is further down somewhere in the code. All right, so let's examine the structure of the for loop. So for loop has the following structure. So it starts with the reserved keyword for. So again, when I say reserved keyword, means that this word is reserved for Python. So you cannot use it for anything else than for loops. So I'm saying for every letter in company name, that's, I think, pretty straightforward, right? It's very simple. So this variable is something that I can name whatever I like. And this is the variable that we're going to be using to iterate over. So this would be the company name, right? So if this was, you know, um, let's say last name, then this would change to last name. Okay, so that's the one that we're going to be iterating over. And this is just some new variable name that we come up with to refer to every um, part of that sequence. So I can say for every letter, and I can name this whatever I like. I can just say for letter in company name. And then here I would have to change it to letter. But let's say for every letter in company name, I want to print every letter. All right, let's see what happens. Great. So as you can see, we did the same thing here with the while loop before, and it gives us the same thing. So what happens is first, every letter, actually, I can do letter here now. And again, it prints the same thing. So first letter is the letter at index 0. And then at index 1, 2, 3, 4, and at index 5. When you specify here just the variable name, Python will automatically know when to stop. So it'll go from the beginning to the end. Okay? So, well, we can do exactly the same thing with it in the while loop. So we can say here, for example, okay, let's change this to T. Okay? Capital T. And we can say something like, well, for letter in company name, if letter, how about is equal to A, then print something like, hey, I got an A. Okay? So, but no matter what happens here with this check, we're still going to print the letter. And the reason we're going to print it every time is that because of this indentation again, so this is not here, right? This is here, which means that even if the letter is not A, this will just work. If the letter is not A, this line will be skipped. We're just going to continue down. Okay, so the moment we print here, what's going to happen is letter will become the next letter. And then it's going to try again, and it's going to do its thing. It's going to print the letter, and then letter is going to become the next letter until finally it gets to the last index and it prints the last letter, and then it'll continue here. All right, so we only have how many A's here in this string? We actually have only one, because even though you see we have two, Python is case sensitive, so it's only going to detect this one. Well, let's put a couple of more here artificially, and let's let it run. Okay, so let's look at our output. So first, the letter is A. Great. So we are going to immediately print this. Hey, I got an A. And then we're going to print the letter. The letter is A. Then the letter becomes V. So, well, V is not equal to A, and therefore we're not going to execute this. And we're just going to directly skip to this. So we're just going to print V. The same thing with I, and the same thing with small a, the same thing with big T and O. And then finally again, letter becomes this A. And once it becomes this A, again, we check, is letter equal to A? And yes, it is. So we're going to print, hey, I got an A again. And then we're going to print the letter again. And finally, it's going to become this A. We're going to do the same thing. And now we're done. We got to the end. And we skip everything and we go and print the next thing below the for loop, which is the same indentation with the for loop. So I think that should be pretty straightforward. Um, so I think that this should be enough to get you started. I'm going to go over this in much greater detail during lecture, and but I think this should be pretty good for now. So you know how to use a while loop, and you know how to use a for loop in a simple kind of case. Keep in mind that you can have nested loops. You can have another for loop inside the for loop. But we'll discuss that when we talk about some of these other structures that are like lists that hold multiple strings that you may want to first iterate through the strings and then you want to iterate through the characters in the string. We'll discuss about that a little later, but I think this should be enough. Please feel free to ask any questions on Piazza, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. Have a great weekend. Bye.